AJ. Oh, here comes my dog. Oh, good boy. He always thinks I'm talking to him. I am a designer and a rug maker. I have a lot of other videos that can help you on your tufting journey. Don't forget to hit subscribe for some future tufting tips. But today, I'm here to share my top tips for beginners. I discovered tufting earlier this year. Actually, I discovered rug hooking and punch needling toward the beginning of the year and just kind of became obsessed with the idea of making a rug. I am a designer and I do some graphic design, but am a user experience designer as a profession. I'm always looking for a new creative outlet. Given that my job is somewhat technical, I love to have some kind of outlet for me to express my creativity and the ideas in my head. So the idea of making a rug just kind of overtook me. I knew it was something that I had to do. I just had this gut feeling. I also really loved interior design and like curating spaces. So the fact that I could possibly make a piece that could live in a space and kind of transform that space was really alluring to me. That's kind of what got me on the rug path, I suppose. Then I discovered the tufting gun. That was the game changer. As soon as I found out about it, I purchased one, and unbeknownst to me, shortly after I ordered the tufting gun, I was actually furloughed from my job due to COVID. I was able to basically spend about 4 months tufting and learning how to tuft full time. It was kind of this serendipitous unfolding that happened for me, and I'm just so grateful that I've been able to dedicate so much time to learning this craft. Honestly, it is the most rewarding, the most inspiring, exciting, satisfying mediums that I've ever discovered. And not only that, but all of the people that I have connected with as a result of putting my work out there and of sharing my knowledge just has been so awesome. I can't recommend it enough. I want to share with you some of my advice that I wish that I knew before I started tufting. So I wrote them down. Now, this is kind of going to be broken up into 2 sections. The first being advice about your physical, mental well-being and kind of mentality going into practicing tufting. And then the second half is more tangible, practical, mechanical tips for actually tufting. So let's get started. Good boy. Number 1. This one's obvious when you are beginning anything new, but pretty important to be very patient. This is a craft that takes a while to get used to. I think it's easy to get discouraged or frustrated, but as soon as you make your first piece, you will feel that immense gratification and it will keep you moving forward, I promise you. But you really have to be patient with the process. 2, I would say to be in your body. I remember the first rug that I was making, I got my frame set up, I got the gun ready. I had done a little bit of practicing, but I was actually gonna make my first rug, and I started and I almost instantly got frustrated. And then I kind of stopped and said, whoa, hey, that's not what we're doing here. What I ended up doing, what I actually often did when I was first learning, was took a step back, I put down my gun, and I danced. I just put my headphones on and I danced around my garage. I just got in a good mood. And I said to myself, there is no point in doing this if I'm gonna be frustrated. And that is something that I think is probably my biggest piece of advice is don't tuft when you're in a bad mood. Any kind of stretching or like anything that you can do to drop in, given that this is a very embodied practice, that you're using your muscles, you're using your whole body, you want joy to be flowing through your body instead of frustration. because it's going to make all the difference, I swear. I remember when I was tufting, I said, okay, nope, not gonna do the frustrated thing. I'm gonna take a step back. Went, got some joy flowing through my bones. And then I returned to the frame and it was so much fun. I was like, yes, this feels good. Any kind of mistake that comes up, you're more likely to let it roll off of you and to remember that this is just part of the process. So be in your body and create your rug with joy. Even if you make mistakes, it's all part of that patience and lightheartedness. Okay, and then number 3 for my advice is, and this one's hard, I know, to not focus too much on the goal of making money. First, I will say that I totally understand the desire to want to sell your rugs. It costs a lot of money to make them. It makes sense to think from that perspective. For me personally, I did have that perspective and I was thinking, yeah, well, once I can start making money, especially given that I was unemployed at the time, I was really putting a lot of pressure on myself without realizing it, that like I had to create rugs that were gonna make me money. And that just really messed with my creative process. It put too much pressure on me. Ultimately, it wasn't until I shifted my perspective and really felt content with the idea of just having tufting as a creative outlet for myself. That's when money started showing up and people started expressing that they wanted to buy my rugs. I don't know, that's just kind of how I believe the universe works, where you have to arrive at a place of non-attachment in order for things to like actually come through. Now, take it or leave it, that's just my perspective. Don't put too much pressure on yourself, essentially, is what I'm trying to say. But that does actually segue us into my tangible tips for beginners, one of which is related to cost. There are definitely ways to cut costs. The initial investment is pretty high. For example, a gun costs nearly $300. The starter kit that I purchased from tuftinggun.com is over $300. That's not cheap. Tufting fabric is pretty expensive. Yarn can be pricey if you're getting good quality stuff. So with all of that being said, there are a couple ways you can cut costs. One of them that I did when I first started out, even though I was very committed to using high quality wool as an end goal, I decided to start with acrylic yarn. I realized that it was stressing me out to use some of my expensive wool when I was first learning, because I felt pressure that I was going to make a rug that was really expensive with a lot of good quality yarn, and it was gonna get messed up because I was still learning. So I chose to buy really cheap acrylic yarn from a craft store. You can essentially use any acrylic yarn from the craft store. I don't like acrylic yarn, I'll just say that. It does come in a lot of beautiful bright colors, but it's synthetic, it doesn't biodegrade. Wool has a lot of pros, especially considering the impact on the environment. I am like super into wool. But when you're first starting, use acrylic. Another way you can cut costs even more is to thrift your yarn. Sometimes Goodwills or thrift stores or some places have like craft specific secondhand stores that I've seen where you can buy thrifted acrylic yarn, because there's a ton of it and it's really wasteful. So there's one way to cut cost. Another thing you can do, though I haven't tried it, is use burlap instead of tufting fabric. I've seen a few tufters who use burlap and their rugs are beautiful. So those are 2 ways you can cut costs while you're first starting out and learning the mechanics of the gun. The second practical tip I have is to get a cut pile gun. I can only say this with confidence because I have now tried both the cut pile and the loop pile guns from tuftinggun.com. I am just so glad that I bought a cut pile gun, because the loop pile gun is honestly pretty hard to get down. I still have not learned how to use it. I know they look very similar, but for whatever reason, I'm having a really hard time learning the loop gun. So get a cut pile machine. I think that the rugs look awesome. I personally like how loop pile rugs look, and I am going to conquer that machine one day, but I find the cut pile machine to just be way more beginner friendly. The fact that you can go back and kind of trim your lines and make things look really crisp and kind of hide your mistakes is pretty awesome for beginners. So get a cut pile machine. Next tip is related to speed. I actually recently taught my sister how to tuft, and she worked on a few squares on my frame here. What I noticed when she first made her first line was that she felt this need to kind of like control the gun. And I know that I did this as well when I first started out. There's this initial need to feel like you have to hold the gun really tight as it's moving, which ends up creating a super dense line, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But what you'll find as you're tufting over time is that there's actually this happy spot in terms of speed where the gun is kind of moving at its own pace and you're sort of just guiding it. There really isn't much need to force the gun unless you are doing curves. There's just this sweet spot where you're just moving with the gun and you're guiding it. That's just something that's gonna come naturally over time as you tuft, and you'll start to know the difference in appearance of a really good line that just felt right versus a line that is wonky, or maybe you were moving too fast or not applying enough pressure and things like that. You'll start to feel that out and you'll know what a good line looks like and feels like, and it's very satisfying. And then my last tip is related to the starter kit from tuftinggun.com, which includes a frame. Make some changes to the frame or make your own. I use this really large frame now, which I absolutely love, and it just makes my life so much easier. But I was reminded of some of the pain points of the starter kit frame when I used it recently. One of them being the yarn feeder sits on the right side of the frame. Now, if you're right-handed like I am, what I've discovered is your yarn needs to feed from the left side so that it doesn't get caught in some of the moving parts of the gun. This used to happen to me all the time, where I would be tufting and suddenly the yarn wasn't moving anymore, and I would look back to realize that it had completely wrapped itself within some of the gears of the gun, which takes so long to take out and is just such a pain in the butt. So ever since I started feeding my yarn from my left side instead of my right side, I have never had that problem. Not only that, I use my left hand right here. I'm right-handed, so I'll use my left hand to kind of guide with this handle here. If the yarn is feeding from the left, I can also use this hand to pull on the yarn as I'm tufting, because with a cut pile machine, you kind of always have to pull the yarn down so that it's not hanging really low, so that you're not wasting a ton of yarn. And I can use my left hand to pull that yarn. I've gotten into this like really familiar habit of using my left hand to kind of feed the yarn from my left side. But I didn't discover that streamlined approach until I started feeding from the left. And I just can't believe how much faster I can tuft by making that small change. So for the starter kit, I would move the yarn feeder from the right side to the left side. Secondly is another pain point of the starter kit frame is you have to have a really solid way of keeping it upright. What I should have done is bought clamps to clamp it to a table, but what I ended up doing is leaning it up against a wall and I use like yoga blocks to kind of keep it far enough away from the wall. It was just always moving around a lot and giving me a lot of trouble. So I would buy clamps for the frame. You don't need them, but I would say if you want to invest in them, you should. I will say I'm really glad that I got the starter kit, because the frame has everything you need. Like, I'm not a construction woodworker type of person, but I was able to set the frame up no problem. If you happen to be carpenter savvy, or if you know someone who is, I would just recommend making your own frame. The starter kit frame, the size of it is a little bit awkward. You can make some really cool circular rugs, but if you're gonna do like a standard doormat size, you actually end up wasting about this much space at the bottom. You could fill with like smaller things like patches or something. It doesn't really allow you to optimize the space unless you're making smaller pieces. I actually did a rug trade for my large frame with a local carpenter in Los Angeles. She was down to make it for me in exchange for a rug. Creating your own frame, having a custom frame, having a larger frame is just so worth it. If you can, it will make things easier. But I will say, always feed from the left side. Now, the last thing I'm gonna say is to use the online community. I feel like I had a relatively easy time getting started. I didn't run into any huge problems that I needed help with, but I do know that it happens. I don't feel like I can personally give advice or speak to some of those more difficult questions, but there is a really great online community with people who are so willing to help. Tim Eads is really involved in the Tuft the World online forum where you can kind of post your questions and people are really gracious in their responses. So if you ever run into a problem, a question, definitely utilize that space, because what I've discovered is that people are really willing to help and share their knowledge. That's something I love about this community and this craft, is that it feels like there's an abundance of cooperative, caring people. And I love that about us. Well, that is all of the tips I have for you today. So to summarize, when you're first beginning, have patience, be in your body, don't put too much pressure on yourself, get a cut pile gun if you can, start with cheaper supplies, don't force the gun, just guide it. Always feed your yarn from your left-hand side if you are right-handed, and modify your frame to fit your needs. I remember that feeling when I first discovered tufting, and it just felt so exciting. Like I was really discovering something that was gonna change my life. Stick with it. I know that there's some tufting gun supplier delays, but I promise you, it will be worth it when you get your gun. And if you haven't bought a gun yet, you can use code MAGIC15 at tuftinggun.com. I mention them a lot because I seriously get just about everything from their store. They are kind of like a one-stop shop for me, and their yarn is incredible quality. I'm absolutely obsessed with it. MAGIC15 will get you 15% off now and forever. You can literally use it on every single order from here on out. Let me know in the comments below if you have any questions and I will do my best to answer them. Also, I'd love to hear what kind of videos you would like to see from me next. Don't forget to subscribe if you like this content, if you want to see more of it. Good luck on all your tufting projects. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon. Bye.